he said. You deserve a day to relax. Those words sounded like kindness, like care, like something a husband who loves his wife might say when he notices the weight she carries on her shoulders. For a moment, I believed him. For a moment, I thought he finally saw me, saw the exhaustion in my eyes, the way my body bent under years of carrying everyone's burdens but my own. I thought this was his way of saying, thank you. I held that sentence in my chest like a gift, not realizing that it was, in fact, a carefully wrapped weapon. When I walked into the spa, I still wanted to believe it. The air smelled of eucalyptus and lavender, and the dim lights created the illusion of peace. My fingers trembled as I held the voucher he had given me. The one he said was all set up so I wouldn't have to think of a thing. I told myself it was sweet, thoughtful, the kind of gesture people post about on social media with captions like, "My husband really gets me." But then, as the receptionist smiled, politely and whispered, "Your party is already inside," I felt the ground shift beneath me. My party. I hadn't come with anyone. My steps echoed softly on the tile floor as I followed her directions, every sound amplifying in my ears. The trickle of water, the faint hum of voices, the clink of glasses. I reached for the handle of the suite door, my palm damp, my heart hammering in my chest. That was the moment everything shattered. Because when I slid the door open, expecting an empty room prepared for me, I saw him, my husband. And next to him, wearing the same robe I was supposed to change into, holding a glass of Prosecco like it was hers all along, was my best friend. I froze in the doorway, the smell of citrus oils thick in the air, the sound of their laughter still hanging before it died in the silence of my presence. His face turned pale, her smile faltered, and in the span of a single breath, the narrative of my life split into two, before that moment and after. If you've ever been treated into silence, if you've ever been given something that looked like love but was really a way to erase you, then you already know what I felt standing there. It wasn't just betrayal, it was annihilation. It was the cruelest form of invisibility, because it told me I wasn't even worthy of being betrayed privately. No, they needed me erased so thoroughly that my own gift would deliver me into the trap. The robe clung too tightly to her shoulders, as if mocking the fact that it should have been mine. The glass in his hand trembled, a faint rattle that betrayed his guilt even before he spoke. And me, I stood there, holding the paper voucher like a fool, realizing that the gift of rest was never for MIT, was for them. In that instant, I learned something I had never allowed myself to see. Kindness without consistency is manipulation. A gift that silences your voice is not love. And sometimes, the people you trust most will weaponize your need for care against you. If this hit a nerve, like this video, and subscribe, because these stories are not just mine, they belong to every person who has been pushed into silence and told it was for their own good. I promise you, this isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about what I did next. Because the woman who walked into that spa was not the same woman who walked out. And I want you to think about this as you listen. If you were handed a moment that threatened to erase you, would you let it destroy you, or would you use it to finally transform your life? They call it a gift when in truth it is a carefully crafted distraction. That morning, my husband smiled at me with the kind of charm that once disarmed me, the kind of charm I used to mistake for love. He pressed the envelope into my hands as though he were giving me the keys to peace itself. "You deserve this," he said, in that measured tone, soft but condescending, like I was a child who had earned a gold star. Inside was a voucher, glossy paper, promising a full day of relaxation at a spa. He framed it as generosity, a break for me, a chance to rest from the weight of household responsibilities I had carried for decades. For a fleeting moment, I let my guard down, thinking maybe, just maybe, he had remembered who I was beneath the roles I played for everyone else. But then came the reinforcement. My best friend, my supposed confidant, chimed in with suspicious enthusiasm. "You should go," she urged, her hand brushing my arm like she cared, her voice a little too insistent. "Take the day, I'll help with whatever you need. Let me even give you a ride. You deserve to feel pampered." Her words dripped with sweetness, but it was the kind of sweetness that leaves an aftertaste. She was more than supportive, she was orchestrating. She arranged the timing, she reminded me of the schedule, she checked in more than once to make sure I was still going. If I had been less trusting, I might have asked myself why she was so invested in me. Being away, there were signs I should have noticed. The reservation, though described as generous, was curiously made for one. No mention of a couple's package, no suggestion of sharing the experience, just me, alone, tucked neatly out of the way. He emphasized how I should really disconnect, how I ought to turn off my phone and just let go. It sounded caring, but underneath the words was something sharper. Stay unreachable, don't call, don't ask questions, don't come back early. He spoke of work meetings, back to back, the kind of schedule that made it impossible for him to join me. I had heard it before, but this time it felt rehearsed. The drive itself was quiet, but the silence was not comfortable. It pressed against my ears as my so-called friend filled the space with little reassurances, phrases designed to steer me away from doubt. You'll love it. You'll come back refreshed. You'll thank him for thinking of you. She almost sounded as if she was trying to convince herself. My eyes glanced at the clock on the dashboard. Everything felt too precise, too rehearsed, like a stage set for a play where I was the only one who didn't know my lines. When I arrived, the spa welcomed me with the expected sensory assault. Eucalyptus in the air, soft music pulsing like a heartbeat, warm light that pretended to soothe. The receptionist smiled, her voice gentle, offering me a robe, sandals, and a key to a locker that smelled faintly of cedar. I should have been at ease, but my skin tingled with unease. I passed a VIP lounge on the way in and noticed 2 champagne flutes resting on a tray. 2, not 1, and on the chair, folded neatly, were 2 robes. The attendant laughed lightly when she saw me pause. "Oh, that's not for you," she said, almost dismissively. "That's for another guest." But the detail snagged in my chest like a hook. 2 glasses, 2 robes, a place meant for company, for sharing, not for solitude. My brain wanted to dismiss it as coincidence, as logistics, as something unimportant. Yet every nerve in me screamed that it mattered. The corridor grew quieter as I walked further, my sandals clicking softly against the polished tile. The air thickened with essential oils, a haze meant to numb the senses, but all it did was sharpen mine. I checked the voucher again, as if reading the words would convince me this was real generosity and not something else. My hands trembled. It didn't feel like freedom, it felt like exile, like I had been politely removed from the stage of my own life. And then came the sentence that would ignite everything. As the receptionist scanned the details on her screen, she smiled without hesitation, looked up at me, and said, "Your party is already inside." For a second, I couldn't even process it. My party? I had come alone. There was no one with me. My stomach turned cold as the words repeated in my mind. Your party is already inside. It was such a simple phrase, but it carried the weight of revelation. A party meant company. A party meant I wasn't alone in this booking, in this space, in this supposed gift. And if my party was already inside, who was it? The echo of her words clung to me as I gripped the robe tighter, my legs unsteady. Have you ever been handed something that looked like love, only to realize it was a method to push you aside? When was the last time a gift felt less like kindness and more like a subtle way of telling you that your presence wasn't needed? Tell me, have you ever been given something that was supposed to make you feel special, but instead made you feel invisible? Share it in the comments, because your story might just give someone else the strength to see through the illusion. There is a strange thing that happens when people train you, slowly, over years, to disappear. It doesn't happen with a single cruel word or one sharp betrayal. It happens in tiny ways, so small you tell yourself not to notice. At first, you even believe it is love, that it is care, that it is normal. You think that giving way is what keeps peace, that swallowing your own needs is what makes you strong, that being the one who bends is the same thing as being the one who holds a family together. That is how it began for me. I started to pay for small things without ever being asked. Groceries, last-minute school expenses, the forgotten bill on the counter. My husband would smile, almost proud, as if to say, "See, she handles everything." At first, I thought it was responsibility, maturity. But then I noticed how quickly it became expectation. No one thanked me anymore. The children grew, my friend came over, and still, I was the one reaching for my wallet, covering what was forgotten. And the more I did it, the less anyone noticed. That is the dangerous trick of invisibility. You become so efficient that people believe you were never really there at all. Then there were the jokes. Light, dismissive, disguised as humor but heavy with disrespect. "Don't get dramatic," he would laugh when I tried to express frustration. "You always exaggerate," he'd say, as though every emotion I had was just a performance. Soon, the friend I trusted most joined in, echoing his lines, reinforcing his narrative. "He's so stressed," she would whisper to me, as though I were his caretaker, not his wife. "Don't push him. Be kind." And every time she said those words, she validated his exhaustion and erased my own. If he came home late, it was because he was working too hard. If I looked tired, it was because I was too sensitive. Slowly, my truth was rewritten, until even I began to question whether my pain was real. The gifts came too, but they were never celebrations of who I was. They were corrections, solutions to problems I didn't ask anyone to solve. A vacuum cleaner when I longed for a piece of jewelry, a cookbook when I dreamed of a trip, skincare when I needed rest. They were framed as thoughtfulness, yet they all carried the same message: fix yourself, improve yourself, change yourself. Never once was there a gift that said, "I see you. I value you as you are." No, the message was always, "You are not enough, but here's something that might make you more bearable." And in the background, my best friend was there, always ready to listen, but not to me. She listened to him. She gave him the sympathy I had earned, the understanding I begged for, the compassion I was denied. She played the role of mediator, telling me to be gentle, telling me to soften, telling me to disappear a little more each day so that he could shine a little brighter. What I did not realize was that in training me to vanish, she was also carving space for herself to take my place. It's strange how, when you look back, you can trace the lines so clearly. The photos where I am on the edge of the frame, blurred, half hidden while everyone else smiles at the center. The family events where I was behind the camera, making sure memories were captured, even though I was never in them. The calendars filled with appointments for everyone else, doctor visits, work meetings, school activities, but almost never a line written for me. The text messages from her, always reminding me to be patient with him, as though my only role was to be the cushion for his chaos. I became so small that I almost didn't notice myself fading. I stopped asking for anything because I knew the answer would be twisted. I stopped expressing frustration because I knew it would be dismissed. I stopped expecting love because I knew it would arrive as correction. Until one day, I realized the terrible truth. I had been trained to disappear from my own life, and I had obeyed. Have you ever realized you are always the one behind the camera in your own story? That while you are capturing the moments, sacrificing your presence, everyone else is being remembered, and you are being erased. Comment I see the pattern if you've felt that, because sometimes the first step to reclaiming yourself is daring to admit that you were pushed out of the frame on purpose. The moment the receptionist said those words, "Your party is already inside," my body moved as though pulled by invisible strings. My hand pressed against the sliding door, my pulse in my ears, louder than the soft music playing in the background. The scent of lavender oil lingered in the air, and for a fleeting second, I still wanted to believe this was some sort of mistake. I told myself maybe she had misread the reservation, maybe someone else had checked in under my name, maybe anything other than what my gut already knew. But the gut rarely lies, and mine was screaming. The door gave way with a quiet hiss, and the world as I knew it split apart. There he was, my husband, reclined on a lounge chair, as though he belonged in a painting of leisure. His posture was too relaxed, too comfortable for someone who claimed to be drowning in meetings. And there she was, my best friend, draped in the spa robe meant for me, the robe that had been promised to me as a symbol of pampering, as a moment of care. She lifted a glass of Prosecco to her lips, and in that instant, I felt as though my lungs collapsed. The bottle sat open on the table, 2 glasses already filled, the kind of detail you cannot misinterpret. Their laughter, light and intimate, froze in the air when they saw me. It was like someone had pressed pause on the world. His hand jerked slightly, the glass in his grip rattling. Her smile faltered, a twitch at the corner of her mouth betraying the fear that rushed through her and me. I stood in the doorway holding the envelope, the voucher, the gift that had brought me here. A prop in the cruelest theater I had ever been forced to attend. He was the first to speak. "Of course, it's not what it looks like." The words fell flat, an insult to both my intelligence and my pain. She chimed in next, her voice high, defensive. "We were just talking." My husband added, "Don't make a scene." That phrase, that dagger of control, sliced through me deeper than the betrayal itself. Don't make a scene as if the scene was the problem, not the betrayal, not the lie, not the years of manipulation that had led me here. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the glass from her hand or claw at the robe that wasn't hers to wear. My silence was louder than anything they could have imagined. I simply looked at them both, and in that moment, I realized something powerful. If I was the one who paid for the silence, if it was my life, my sacrifices, my money that had built this illusion, then I would be the one to decide when that silence ended. Not him, not her, me. I let my eyes travel across the room, anchoring on the details that would burn themselves into memory. The gold band on his finger that suddenly felt more like a shackle than a promise. The faint smear of lipstick on the rim of her glass, proof of intimacy disguised as accident. The plaque on the wall that read couples, sweet, mocking me with its honesty, because the truth was right there in plain sight. They hadn't even bothered to choose subtlety. They had chosen arrogance. My breath steadied as I stood there, my body trembling not from weakness but from the weight of clarity. Betrayal doesn't need fireworks. It announces itself in the quiet details, the robe, the glass, the laughter that stops too quickly. And what crushed me most was not that they had betrayed me, but that they had conspired to erase me, to replace me, to enjoy what was meant for me while I was pushed outside the door. I didn't shout at them, though my heart begged me to release the fury building in my chest. I didn't demand explanations, because I already knew the answers would be lies. I didn't beg for forgiveness, because there was nothing left to preserve. Instead, I stood taller in that robe I hadn't yet worn, with the paper voucher crumpling in my hand, and I let silence convict them more than words ever could. Is there ever a rational explanation for something that steals your peace? Can betrayal ever be explained away as an accident, a misunderstanding, a moment of weakness? Or is it always exactly what it looks like, no matter how much they try to dress it up in excuses? Tell me in the comments if you were the one standing in that doorway. Would you demand answers, or would you let the silence speak for you? The moment betrayal is caught in the open, you expect shame to take over. You expect silence, stumbling apologies, desperate attempts to repair what has been broken. But what no one warns you about is the second betrayal, the way the guilty will twist the story until you are the one who ends up wearing the blame. Standing in that spa suite, I thought the silence would speak for itself, but instead, the silence became a stage for their performance. He was the first to break it, his voice low, pretending at patience but dripping with accusation. "You've been distant," he said, as though my exhaustion, my sacrifices, my fading into the background were crimes I had committed against him. I almost laughed. Distant. I had been the one carrying every invisible burden, the one funding the comfort of a house that never thanked me, the one putting myself last so he could shine. And yet, in his version of the story, I had neglected him. I was the villain, and his betrayal was simply an act of survival. Then she added her part, stepping smoothly into the role she had clearly rehearsed. "He needed support," she said, her eyes wide with false innocence, as though she had been summoned into service like some noble friend. She positioned herself as his comfort, his savior, his shoulder to lean on all, while stabbing me in the back with the robe she wore and the glass she held. It was such a neat little story, wasn't it? The tired, dramatic wife who abandoned her husband emotionally, and the loyal best friend who stepped in out of kindness. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Their words tangled around me like vines, trying to choke the truth out of my chest. "Don't overreact. This isn't what you think. You've been too busy with your own stuff to see him." The gaslighting was thick, heavy, relentless. They wanted me to question my own reality, to doubt what my eyes had seen, to replace the raw facts with their carefully polished narrative. And for a split second, I felt the familiar pull, the training to doubt myself, to shrink, to swallow anger and wear guilt, like it belonged to me. But something inside me snapped differently this time, because while they spoke, I remembered the patterns. I remembered the late nights explained away with work. I remembered the texts she sent me about how stressed he was, how I should go easy on him, how I should be more patient. And then, later, when I went back and looked, I found the evidence tucked neatly into the digital shadows, messages between them, some ordinary, others carefully deleted, but a few slipped through. "Did you book the suite?" "Yes. He'll never suspect," leaked after my blood turned cold, not with fear, but with a rising clarity. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had planned it. They had orchestrated my absence, manipulated my trust, engineered my silence. The spa was paid for, but not with his sacrifice. No, the charges hit our joint account. My money had funded the stage for my own humiliation. The card statement told a story they couldn't twist. Room charges, champagne, the couple's suite, every line was another nail in the coffin of their lies. And that was the moment the balance of power shifted. I stopped being the confused woman standing in the doorway and became the woman gathering proof. I pulled the Fatora, saved the messages, archived every whisper they had tried to erase. I knew if they could rewrite this day, they would. So I wrote it down myself in the ink of receipts and screenshots. Then, I did something that shocked even me. I opened my own account. Quietly, deliberately, I moved to protect what was mine. The automatic transfers that had kept his lifestyle comfortable. The shared funds that paid for luxuries while I was given practical gifts. The money that flowed from my labor into his eyes. I stopped them. For years, my money had fueled a home where I was invisible, but now, it would fuel my survival. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I didn't beg. I built. Quietly, steadily, piece by piece, I built the scaffolding of a future that belonged only to me. And when I saw their faces, smug in their belief that their words had twisted the knife deep enough, I almost pitied them, because they thought they had destroyed me, but what they had done was awaken me. If this part gave you strength, type I choose me, because sometimes, the greatest power comes not from the storm you unleash, but from the foundation you lay while they still think you're standing in ruins. There comes a moment when silence is no longer enough, when the truth has to be dragged into the light with the cold weight of evidence. I chose not to scream at the spa, not to claw at their excuses or waste my strength fighting their twisted words. Instead, I gathered, I documented, and when I was ready, I called them both to a meeting. Not in the intimacy of our home, where they could twist walls and memories against me, but in the neutral space of a cafe where eyes might witness what dignity demanded. I sat first, a folder on the table in front of me. My hands did not shake, though inside, every nerve hummed with fire. They arrived together, as though showing unity would soften the blow. He sat across from me, her by his side, like an unholy union daring me to accept what they framed as reality. But this time, I had brought my own reality with me, printed on paper and glowing on the screen of my phone. I slid the first page across the table. Charges from the spa, the couple's suite, the bottle of Prosecco, the services for two. His eyes dropped, his lips pressed into a thin line, but he said nothing. She shifted uncomfortably, crossing and uncrossing her legs. The robe from that day suddenly heavier on her conscience, though she wasn't wearing it anymore. Then came the messages. I had them saved, captured before they could vanish into digital smoke. Her text, "Did you book it?" His reply, "Yes, she won't suspect a thing." And then, the one that sealed it, "Delete after." I placed the phone on the table, the screen glowing with their betrayal. Their faces paled under the weight of their own words. Finally, I pulled out the joint account statements, the line items highlighted in yellow. "This isn't just betrayal of love," I said, my voice calm, steady, sharp as glass. "This is betrayal with my money." Every highlighted number was a weapon now turned against them. Every dollar stolen from me to fund their fantasy was proof that they had underestimated me. He tried to speak first, but I cut him off with the first line I had rehearsed over and over. "You don't get to define my betrayal." The words hung in the air, final, undeniable. For years, they had written the story of my life, turned my exhaustion into weakness, my silence into complicity. Not anymore. When he opened his mouth again, I leaned forward and delivered the second blow. "My money doesn't fund my erasure." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing, because the papers in front of him made words useless. She glanced at him, then at me, as if hoping to find cracks in my armor, but I had none left for her to exploit. I straightened in my chair, each word measured, deliberate, carved in stone. "Separation. 30 days. A lawyer will contact you." He looked as if I had slapped him, though I hadn't raised my hand. She shifted again, shrinking in her seat, as though realizing that the game had changed and her role in it was now one of exposure rather than triumph. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating, louder than any scream I could have unleashed. Watched the weight of consequences settle on their shoulders, the panic just beginning to rise behind their eyes. For once, it was not me shrinking, it was them. I gathered my papers, slid them back into the folder, and stood. My chair scraped lightly against the floor, a sound that echoed with finality. Their faces were pale, speechless, and for the first time in years, I felt taller than the room itself. What boundary have you postponed for years? Tell me in the comments, because maybe today is the day you stop waiting for permission to draw the line. The days that followed were not filled with dramatic fireworks or explosive confrontations. They were built with small, deliberate choices, each one a stone laid on the path back to myself. People think rebirth happens all at once, with some triumphant announcement or a symbolic burning of the past. But the truth is quieter, heavier, and far more practical. It begins with the smallest of victories that no one else sees but you. The first thing I did was change my passwords. Every account, every login, every hidden corner of the digital life that I had once shared with him, I reclaimed. It felt almost silly at first, fingers trembling over the keyboard as I typed new combinations. But when I pressed enter, when the systems told me the changes were successful, it was as if I had shut 100 invisible doors and finally placed the keys in my own pocket. My privacy was mine again, and with it came a sliver of peace. Then I opened a new bank account, one with only my name on it, untouched, unseen, and unreachable by him. For years, I had funneled money into a life that erased me, watched it slip through our joint account into expenses I never approved, luxuries I never enjoyed. Now, every dollar that entered that account was a promise to myself. It didn't matter if it was a small deposit or a larger one, it was mine. It was a financial breath, the first in years where I didn't feel strangled by obligation. I did something else too, something I had postponed for far too long. I booked therapy, not for him, not for us, not for the family, for me. I sat across from someone whose only job was to listen to me, to validate me, to remind me that my feelings were not an inconvenience, but evidence of my humanity. That hour each week became a sanctuary, a space where I could hear my own voice again without it being drowned out by guilt or gaslighting. And then, I went even further. I enrolled in a course I had dreamed of taking years ago, something small but powerful, a skill that had always felt just out of reach because life was too busy. It was symbolic, really an act of defiance against the story they had written for me. Every lesson was a reminder that my life was not over, that I could still learn, grow, build, and become. At home, I reclaimed my environment. There was a room in the house that he had always hated, painted in certain colors. He insisted on neutrals, on beige, on blandness that reflected his need for control. So I bought a can of paint in a shade he despised, bold and alive, and I painted the walls myself. With every stroke of the brush, I felt myself rewriting the space, marking it as mine, turning suffocation into freedom. The smell of fresh paint clung to me like armor, a declaration that this was no longer his house, it was mine. But freedom does not only come from walls or money. It comes from people, from the circles you build around yourself. I reached out to women I had once drifted away from, those who had quietly respected me, but whom I had neglected while drowning in his demands. Slowly, a network formed, women who knew what it meant to be overlooked, undervalued, erased. Together, we shared stories, strategies, laughter that wasn't poisoned by betrayal. For the first time in years, I was surrounded not by people who drained me but by people who nourished me. I also reevaluated relationships that once seemed unshakable. Friendship, I realized, was not an unbreakable bond but a contract. And contracts can be renegotiated or cancelled when one party betrays the terms. My best friend, the one who had sat in that spa robe meant for me, was no longer allowed unguarded access to my life. I set boundaries so high she would have to climb mountains to cross them. And family, even they were not exempt. Love, I decided, was not a license to trample my dignity. Everyone would be held to limits now, limits defined by me. Through it all, I carried a mantra, one that came to me in the quiet after the chaos. It wasn't the spa that changed me. It wasn't the sight of them together, or the lies they spilled to protect themselves. It was the realization that the door had never been locked from the outside. The door opened from my side, and once I understood that, there was no force strong enough to keep me trapped inside their narrative. If you've followed me this far, then you know this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about transformation, about the strength found in taking back what was always yours. So if this resonated with you, like this video and subscribe. because stories like this deserve to be shared and remembered. And now I'll ask you, what's your first 7-day step toward autonomy? Think about it carefully, because one choice, one action, one small victory could be the beginning of a life that finally belongs to you. Share it in the comments, I promise. Your words might just inspire someone else to open their own door. There comes a moment in every storm when you realize that the thunder and lightning, no matter how terrifying, are not there to destroy you but to reveal the strength you already carry inside. My storm came in the form of betrayal, in the sight of two people I trusted most, laughing in the space that was supposed to be my gift. For a long time, I believed that moment defined me, that humiliation was the headline of my story. But what I have learned is that the storm is not the ending, it is the turning point. It is the hand of fate shaking you awake, demanding that you no longer live small, no longer shrink, no longer surrender your dignity just to keep the peace. I realized that pain can either bury you or plant you. When I chose not to crumble, when I chose to stand and gather the pieces of myself, I was planting something new, a life not built on fear but on faith, a life not chained to someone else's expectations but rooted in the truth of my own worth. Every betrayal is also an unveiling, a painful stripping away of illusions that once held us captive. And though it hurts, though it can leave scars, those scars are proof that you survived what was meant to break you. Faith, I've come to understand, is not about believing everything will always be easy or that people will never fail you. Faith is about knowing that even when the ground collapses beneath your feet, you are not falling into emptiness, you are falling into the hands of something greater. And inspiration, real inspiration, does not come from never being hurt. It comes from standing again, from choosing to rise, from daring to believe that your story still matters, even when others tried to erase it. What sustained me was not the absence of pain, but the decision to see myself as more than the pain. I could have stayed frozen in that spa doorway, defined forever by what I saw. Instead, I chose to walk through a different door, the one I opened with my own hand, the one that led to freedom. And I believe with all my heart that someone watching this right now is standing at a door to. Maybe it is betrayal, maybe it is neglect, maybe it is a lifetime of being told you are too much or never enough. That door will not open by waiting for someone else to turn the key. It opens from your side. Do not wait for permission to live. Do not wait for apologies that may never come. Do not wait for the people who hurt you to suddenly decide to heal you. Your healing is yours. Your future is yours. Your life is yours. And it begins with one step, one choice, one breath that says, I am worth more than this. Every scar you carry is a story of survival. Every tear you've shed is evidence that you still feel, still love, still believe. And if you are still breathing, then your story is not over. You can rebuild. You can redefine. You can rise from the very ashes they thought would smother you. This is not blind hope, it is the truth written into every soul that has ever been underestimated, overlooked, or betrayed. You are stronger than you think, braver than you believe, and more capable than they ever wanted you to discover. So hold on to faith. Let it guide your steps when the path feels uncertain. Let inspiration be the fire that keeps you moving when everything around you tells you to stop. And above all, remember that the door is there, waiting, and the handle is on your side. All you have to do is decide to walk through it. If this story spoke to you, like this video and subscribe, because more voices deserve to rise from silence into strength. And don't stop here, because in the next video, I will share another story of survival, one that will challenge the way you see loyalty, sacrifice, and the courage it takes to finally say enough. You won't want to miss what comes next.